Hello, these are basic instructions on how to paint the swirly tree. This painting will use the large flat brush for the background, and you will want to go down brush sizes when we do smaller details. This video is sped up. I recommend watching it through entirely before painting, then watch it again while painting and pausing often. To start, we're going to get the big brush and we're going to get it wet, and then we want to start with yellow paint. I got a little ahead of myself and I started to paint the circle, but essentially you're going to want to add a tiny bit of white to some yellow on your brush and then start painting a circle in the middle of your canvas. We are then going to move on to a reddish orange color, and I have these colors on my brush but not necessarily mixed, just to ease into this color straight off from the yellow. This whole background really uses a lot of blending, so we want to use minimal paint on our brush. We're going to want to make sure our brush has water in it, not a ton, but just a little damp, and just keep blending our colors out as we go. So this orange one, I definitely want it a little bit darker, so now I'm mixing the color on my plate, as you see, and now I'm getting it a little bit darker as I continue my circle outward. At this point, I'm going to move on to pink. So I have a little bit of that orange yellow still in my brush, which I'm going to keep it in there just to help with the blending of the colors. So I pick up some pink and I start working the circle outward some more. And like I said earlier, this is all about blending. So I just keep working in some pink and making that circle larger and larger. So this is where I take some of my pink, and in order to blend, I'm trying to go down into the reddish orange color a little bit and bring it back out into the pink. That's the key to blending, is you go back into the color that you just did and then you continue. Soon we are going to be moving on to the green color, which is a big jump from pink, and we really can't blend it because green and pink blended together makes kind of a brown color. So this is how we're going to put on the green. We're just going to put it on outside of the pink. I had a little bit too much pink in my brush, so I cleaned it out. So now we're going to get about an inch of green going around there, maybe a little bit more. Exact measurements aren't necessary because everybody is going to paint this differently, and it's your tree, and we want to make sure that we have our own little spin to it. So the green is going to be approximately an inch, but if you want more green, do more green. If you don't want any green, you can skip green. This is your masterpiece. So you're going to work the green in there, and this edge between the pink and green is going to be a little awkward, but trust me, it comes together in the end. No matter any issues you have with the background, once we put the tree on top of it with that black paint, it really pulls it all together. So don't fret if you're not a big fan of the background. We blend it out quite a bit more and it all comes together. So now we're moving on to the blue. Now the blue and the green you can blend, because blending these two colors together makes a really nice middle color. So pop some of that blue on there. This is the light blue. Pop some of that blue on there and make sure you go back into the green to get it nice and blended. And obviously if you need to move this canvas around to reach different areas better, you can move this canvas around as often as you need. Flip it upside down, go sideways, whatever you need to do this canvas. And while we're talking about moving the canvas, now that we're getting out to the edges, I recommend painting these edges black when you're done. It's really hard to continue the circular pattern onto the edges, so I won't show that in this video, but when you're all done, I do recommend painting the edges a solid black. And the edges are just the sides of the canvas, and the black will look really nice because you have the black tree. So now the blue, we're obviously getting to the corners, and there's not a whole lot of blue, but we put that on there. And then after the blue, we move on to the purple. So this blue is kind of just there to be a blending tool later. And we do want the blue to dry a little bit before we put the purple on there, and that's what I'm doing now. So we'll move on to the purple. You can go ahead and blend that blue that you just did with the purple a little bit. Make sure all of the corners get a little purple in there. At this point, I'm realizing that we have a lot more blending to do. So I recommend making sure your brush is completely clean. Oh, I skipped a step. So we need to make this pink to green jump with a little bit of a purple line. It just makes it kind of come together. I know it looks awkward now, but trust the process, because later we're going to take some more pink and we're going to cover up some of this purple. So I went to go ahead and blend some green, and I had a little bit too much water, so now I have a little bit of a white spot down, but that's okay. It's going to dry, and then it's not going to be noticeable. So in order to help blend these colors out a little bit, I am taking some green and I'm working it into the blue, and then taking some blue and then working it into the green. You're going to want to blend this out as much as possible until you're happy with it. And then to help with that pink purple line, I definitely go back in and I try to just paint over that purple line a little bit and leave a little bit of that purple showing. So I paint with pink and I cover up some of that purple line, but it's definitely still recognizable. And I'm just going to work these colors in until I'm happy with it. I'm going to add a little more of that reddish orange color and just really get crazy with the blending. Now, if you're getting to the point where you're blending a little bit too much and it's getting a little out of hand, which I almost did right here, but I was able to blend that pink out, that reddish pink. It looked nice in the end. Just get to a point where you're happy with it, because like I said before, the black tree is really going to cover up any glaring mistakes that you may have made, or if this background's looking a little too crazy, the tree really helps mute everything. So when you're done blending everything out, we're going to add a white circle, and then I added a little bit of white wispies just to make it seem more swirly. So I put some white in there. I took some more yellow to mellow out the white, and it's looking pretty good. Now, as you can see, the tree stencil is still visible. So that is very important to remember as you're painting, is you want to keep the tree stencil as visible as possible. Although I did pack the tree stencil with yours, so if you have to re-stencil it, you can. But for the most part, you should try to keep that visible, because that means you're not painting with too much paint. So I decided to go back in and cover up the purple a little bit more. Now it's still very visible. You can see that purple line, but now it's just not as noticeable. And personally, I like this a lot better. So I'm glad I made this decision, and I covered up that purple line almost all the way, but it still pops and it's still noticeable. And at this point, I am happy with my background. So we're going to jump to painting our tree. So the most important thing to remember when we're painting the tree is to water down your black until it gets to a nice inky consistency, which is what I'm doing here. You're just going to want to add water and just keep adding water until it gets to, like I said, something more like ink, and it just makes it so much easier to paint with. And then you want to move down a brush size. So you want to use something a little bit smaller, like a medium smallish, and then you'll jump down even smaller when we do fine details. So I recommend starting with the edges of the pencil line, And you're just going to want to trace all of your black edges all the way. And I fill in this big trunk I'm going to fill in later with the bigger brush. But as I go, I'm going to maybe fill in the smaller branches with the smaller brush. So, nice short brush strokes. Now, you can see how slow I am going here, but this video is still sped up. So, take your time on this. Make nice thin lines. The most important thing that I can recommend here is to not have a lot of paint on your brush. You're going to want to dip in the paint often. If you have too much paint on your brush strokes are going to get big and fat, and your tree branches will suffer for it. So, small, even brush strokes. Make sure your black paint is nice and watered down. Like you can see here, I filled in some of the smaller areas with my smaller brush, but I still left the bigger area unfilled in because I'll do that with a bigger brush later. So right now we are still just filling in our stencil. We have not gone in and done any of our freehand branches yet. So this is still just outlining and filling in our stencil. So here I am filling in the trunk of the tree, and I decided to use the same brush. So I'm using the smaller brush, which is fine. Do whatever feels best to you. I'm always going to recommend smaller brushes when you do smaller detail work, but this is your masterpiece and you can paint it however you like. So all of my stenciled portions are filled in, and now I'm going to be adding the swirly leaf parts. There's swirls and their leaves. So as you can see, I've already done a couple, and I'm using a smaller brush, smaller than the one I used to fill in the stencil. And you're going to want to do these swirly branches. I moved it a little bit closer so you can see more detail. Swirly branches, and then more like just a little bit of a stick and then a leaf. So the rest of this is entirely made of swirly branches and leaves. Now, I recommend looking at the original painting to see placement of these branches and leaves. I'm doing this, it's all freehand, but I'm referencing the original to see where these branches are going to come in from the edge of my painting. So that the entire rest of this painting is just swirly branches and leaves. And then even further, once you get all of these blocked in, you're going to take the smallest brush you have and add a couple smaller swirlies, which will be apparent in just a little bit. Okay, so once you've gotten some of the basic swirls and branches, that's when you're going to go in with that smaller brush that I showed you. This is my smallest brush. And now I'm doing really small swirls. I'm filling in where I think a little small swirl belongs, and I'm putting it in there. Now, this is all completely up to you and your preference. You can do a lot, you can do a little, but these do help kind of fill in a little bit more of that open space and brings the painting together. I'm down to my last couple of mini leaves and swirlies, and I am happy with it. So once you're happy with it, you are done. You can give it initials down in the corner, and you're good to go. Thanks for painting with me.